Why, good Christmas, everybody. This is a post commentary I've done over a video of me disassembling and reassembling that Bosch e-bike battery. Or actually, this is a different one. You can see the owner of this battery behind me. I'm the one in the blue corduroy, and the actual owner of this pack is sitting behind me. This is actually a 400 watt hour version of the Bosch e-bike battery, but otherwise it's the same. Internally, the PCB and everything is pretty much the same. I'm going to use the same battery cells in that box to resell the battery. Now this owner says he has driven about 20,000 kilometers, that's 12,000 miles on or about. On this bike, he's got an S pedelec, which means it's like a faster bike. It goes about 1.5 times as fast as the one that I used. So 20,000 kilometers is pretty long way. Opening the box, just undoing a couple screws and prying off those clips. Now here the battery is open, and you can see like there's a PCB that sits on top of a couple pretty stiff wires, and on the right you can see a little connector that I'm going to decouple. That's the balancing connector, well, the sensing connector, I guess. It just opens with a little flap. Undoing the large connections to the battery, so the actual power connections, takes a lot of heat. If you have a wimpy like AOUE or Weller soldering iron, you're going to need two, like I did here, and maybe ask somebody to actually pry off the PCB from the wire while you are heating the wire. As you can see, I've asked the owner to assist me here. Kind of fun. Slightly dangerous, but you know. And there we go. The BMS is now loose from the pack, and we have to remove the second connection to the pack, which is actually on the other side. So it's that connection that I'm heating right now. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. And when putting this BMS back on the pack, you basically do this in reverse. You clean out the hole, use a solder sucker for that, and push the wire through, and then simply heat it up with some new solder, and it should be all good. Now there's this ribbon cable that we need to pry loose, and the easiest way to do that is just basically to pull it off. It's been tab welded onto the pack, so it's almost impossible to do anyway else. And yes, you are going to slightly damage them, and you will see later in the video how we fix that. I just use a chisel and some moderate force to do this. Now here's the fun part. This is removing the tabs from the cells, and I do this with a chisel and a hammer. And as long as you have a sharp but not too sharp chisel, so you don't actually hack into the battery cells themselves, and as long as you use a moderate amount of force, it should be all right. You can easily feel how this works. Now don't do this. You might want to use like a little bit of cardboard to insulate your chisel when working on this angle. Yeah, that was stupid of me, I know. I'm stupid sometimes. Yeah, so basically you remove all the tabs, and please do keep the tabs. It will make your life a lot easier when rebuilding the pack. And if you bend any pins, just use a pair of pliers to straighten them out. Now when all the tabs are off, you can remove the actual plastic housing, which is very satisfying. Just remove the clips with a screwdriver, and it just comes off, and then you can push out the battery cells, and there you go. It's off now. And then we turn it over, and we do the other side. By far the coolest part of a resell of this type of battery. Now we use the new cells. The old cells were actually pretty good. They were Samsung 2900 milliamp hour cells, but they were old chemistry, so they were pretty bad at working in cold temperatures. And these are the new 3500 IMRs from Samsung. They're pretty good. And obviously putting it in the plastic is very easy. They just fit. Now is the fun part, and this actually took more than an hour. Reattaching all the tabs. So you can see here that every tab pretty much needs at least 2 welds on it, just to make sure that it's on securely. Because I am reusing those tabs that I removed with the chisel before. So this takes a long time. You have 40 cells, 2 sides. Every side needs at least 2 welds, usually 3. So by the end of welding, actually the welding head was becoming very hot, too hot to touch. But it did hold up. Like this welder, this Sunko welder, I'm amazed that it still works for being such poor build quality. And when welding, make sure that there is no gap between the tab and the cell, because you see some sparks flying here and there. That's when there's an arc forming, and that just ruins the tabs. And it's also pretty hard on the welder, so do avoid that. There's no avoiding sometimes, but just be careful. This is the finished result. All the tabs are on, so the pack is fully welded. And now we need to reattach that sensing lead again. And the way we do that is by soldering on little bridge wires. So in order to prepare everything, we need to scratch off the solder resist on top of the ribbon cable. Doing that with a knife here. And then when you're done with that, we're going to apply a little dab of solder on the ribbon, and then a little dab of solder on the actual pack itself. So here I am applying it to the ribbon. And then on the pack, so directly onto the tabs, I'm putting a little bit of solder there just to make sure we can easily make contact. And then we take a little bit of wire and we just heat up one side and heat up the other, and then it's on. And here's the finished result. If you look very carefully, there are tiny little wires. And then basically you put on the PCB same way it went off. This was very hard to film, so I skipped that. And you put everything in the housing. And really, that is the rebuild. There's not much to it, because you can remove the BMS. So everything else is pretty much riskless. You have no risk of depowering the BMS and possibly losing state of charge. It just works. You can just solder everything on the same way you removed it. Make sure the strap, there's like a little plastic bar that holds on the strap on the side I'm working on right now. And then there's a screw on the other side. Make sure that you don't lose those. The rest just clips on. And here we can see I've got the charger, and it does charge. So it worked. So that's the full rebuild. I hope this was useful to people who want to rebuild this style of Bosch e-bike battery. I know there were quite a few comments on the previous video where I just said I did it and never showed it. But hopefully this is good. And of course, I wish you a very merry second Christmas day, I guess. And see you in the next one.